Castology.
Hello, it's podcast time. This is Castology. I am Liz Best, one of your castologists, here with
Nick Bleeker.
and
Zane C. Weber.
Zen C. Weber.
Wow.
And here we talk about podcasts, we recommend podcasts, and we review podcasts for you because we love you.
And each other.
And each
We
other.
do.
A little bit each other. I mean, mostly for Zane.
Yeah, mostly for me. I listen to the most podcasts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nick's face just went, fine, fuck my drag then.
I'm just going to drink my water.
So, as you fellow listeners know, we recommend podcasts, and then a fortnight later, we'll review the podcast that we recommended last main episode because we've got mini-sodes, we've got tiny-sodes now.
Tiny-sodes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Curated lists from each of us is an easy peasy little scroll to if you need particular tips on particular topics.
And technically, you're getting more podcast recommendations a week.
More
Yeah.
per
On
week.
average.
We're working harder now.
More per week. We're totally working harder. This was not to alleviate the workload on us at all. So this week for our recommendations, we have no theme
No theme.
because we had a theme last week, but we'll get to that. So this week, I would like to start with Nick's recommendation.
My recommendation is a podcast called Rabbit Hole. Now, full disclosure, it's a New York Times podcast. What a surprise. We're going to move on.
This is not The Atlantic.
Well, no, but it's a publication of some sort.
It's true.
So, and that's literally all I've been recommending the last fucking 4 months.
Yeah, but I'm into it.
Oh,
mostly.
cool. All right.
Mostly. Like,
Great.
You're not recommending crap.
Well, I hope not. So, Rabbit Hole is, I think, pretty sure it is, a limited series from the New York Times that focuses not so much on like the origins of the internet, but more about how the internet can change people. Now, the internet is vast, right? So
and also a garbage dumpster fire.
correct, but great sometimes, like fart TikTok. That's pretty funny, but we'll go to that
Did
a
you
bit
say
later.
fart
Wow.
TikTok?
Yeah, fart TikTok. Yeah, it's hilarious.
I'm going to cancel this podcast. I think we're done.
We're
So
done.
funny. It's so funny. Oh, forgive me if I've got a sense of humor that.
the
I do enjoy
line-
fart jokes.
The
Thank you.
line was fart TikTok. No, look,
podcast name.
I just want to...
No. No, Zane's the look on Zane's face.
ASMR. Look, the internet is vast and it is a garbage dumpster fire, much like humanity itself.
Yes.
100%.
Yes.
There are gleaming glimpses of like goodness in places, but yeah.
And then people set fire to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give it enough time and everything will be burnt down.
Yeah.
Well,
okay, so what's this podcast
Rabbit
about?
Hole, Rabbit Hole may frame that a little bit. So the purpose of the show is more to talk about what happens when the significant shift of people being offline to being online. So the focus of the show is less about just like sort of X and Y topic and this and that. It's very focused on a key group of people. So unfortunately, there is a focus on conspiracy theorists, right wing, QAnon,
I mean, those are the
gaming, all that sort of
extremes
shit. But those are the
internet
extremes
culture.
of the internet culture. The show doesn't so much point a laser at it the whole fucking time, but it talks about going. It's the journey to get to that point.
Yeah.
So the first couple of episodes of the show focus on someone who was kind of quite left leaning, and I haven't listened to this show for quite some time, but they were quite left leaning for a period of time, and then they started watching YouTube more and more, and the algorithm started shifting more and more to the point where they're now far right conspiracy theorist. And what the show does is examine that sort of, I guess, de-evolution of that person to that point and how they got to that point. It doesn't focus so much specifically on that. It goes to like examining like PewDiePie, who's like one of the biggest YouTubers. I know, roll your eyes. Oh, seriously,
Yeah, I
fucking
did. I
hate
rolled
Pew.
them into the back of my head.
Oh, terrible. But it's the PewDiePie section is fine. And then it finishes off with the QAnon stuff because I think at the time of looking at this, QAnon was kind of on the up. So the last episode was in the middle of 2020. So that would be kind of, I guess, on the rise of QAnon.
Fever
right?
pitch
Yeah.
of QAnon.
It's true. Now that they've been wrong about JFK being resurrected and running with Trump in the upcoming
That's
election, QAnon doesn't have much credibility anymore.
No,
Yeah.
they've been wrong about a lot.
Yeah, I haven't really seen their
lot.
hit marks are pretty off. But anyway, so it's called Rabbit Hole. It's by the New York Times. I found it quite fascinating. I really wish it wasn't a limited series, ironically, because for me, I feel like the internet, how vast the internet is, can be explored in those sort of, I guess, bigger subcultures that exist on there. But I feel like this does feel kind of purpose-built for the time that it was produced, which was in the middle of the political tension of the US and all that sort of shit last year.
Yeah, cool. All right, I'm going to go next.
Do it.
So
Yeah.
imagine The Office.
Okay.
But if The
UK or
Office
US?
US.
Excellent.
Okay.
That's the best version.
But if the jobs of the people in the office was not to sell paper, but to be hitmen people.
Okay. I mean,
Already better than season 8 now.
I feel like that is already what Dwight Schrute is.
Yes,
he's
possibly. So this podcast is called Hit Job, and it's an Audible original, which, as we found, Audible originals do tend to be exclusive to Audible for a period of time, and it's usually a lengthy period of time, but eventually they end up releasing it out to the wild after a while. So this follows a character called Bryn Morris, who is played by Kiki Palmer, who's an aspiring artist desperate for a job so that she can help her sick grandma, and as a last resort, she takes a job doing admin at this company that has the motto, do bad things for good reasons. And so she kind of ends up getting roped into a killing contest when she didn't want to participate in any of the killing at all. And a lot of the bad guys in this particular podcast are very, very thinly veiled intellectual property of others.
So they are parodies.
They are parodies, yes.
For legal reasons.
Yes, that's legal. They are satire and parodies of existing villains. My favorite is Hot Kyle, though, and he's not an existing property. He's just a guy named Kyle who's really hot, who's voiced by Aaron Tveit and does sound really hot. That's his killer name, Hot Kyle. And so it's
good that he's self-aware.
It's got like Natasha Lyonne in it, and it's got Pete Davidson, who's in everything at the moment, including Kim Kardashian. Anyway, it's great. It's wonderful. I loved it. It was one of those ones that I just kind of was like, I just really enjoy this. Like, it's just silly and it's fun and it's a little bit murdery, but in a really lighthearted, officey kind of,
So it's
Michael
basically
Scott kind
it's
of
a
way.
sitcom about the wacky hijinks of a group of hitmen.
Yeah.
Hit people, I guess.
A company, corporate hit people.
Yeah,
Corporate
corporate
hit people.
Yes, that is exactly it.
Okay.
Limited series, soundscaped as well as acted.
And complete as of...
And complete,
Yep.
yes.
You said it was Audible, yeah?
Yes. Audible original. At this point, hopefully they release it out further.
Yeah.
Great. Zane.
I'm recommending, excuse me, that's illegal.
Excuse me.
Excuse me, that's illegal.
Okay.
Are you saying that to Liz or are you saying that to the
I'm
podcast
saying
name?
it to all of you
Okay,
because this is now pirate radio. No, so basically this is a one-person podcast hosted by a fellow called Leroy, and it just takes it's kind of like idiot criminals. People who are committing crimes for weird reasons or doing like weird crimes or like, those weird loophole crimes where like you can technically not ride a camel through Massachusetts without being arrested, that sort of thing. So it's not murdery, it's not gory, it's not even like particularly serious. It's really kind of the funny side.
I just
of, like,
love the title of it, though.
crime.
Excuse me.
That's illegal.
It's just like you walking up to someone and going like, I'm not sure if you're allowed
Excuse me.
to do that here.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's just a little bit of fun. They have an interesting release schedule as well. They release 3 times a month, so on the 10th, the 20th, and the 30th of the month.
That is not standard.
It's weird.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I think that's
illegal.
So have a look. Like the descriptions are fairly indicative of what the episode's going to be about. Have a look and find some interesting ones.
Yeah, cool. All right, it's on to the reviews. Let's just power through this episode, shall we?
Let's get through it.
So we had a theme last week, and it was how to. And as I pointed out last week, I feel like what we chose says a lot about us as humans. So first of all, I would like to know let's go with the DIY musician first, Zane.
Okay, so the DIY Musician Podcast is a podcast that's released by CD Baby, which is Compact Disc Baby.
Not CD Baby.
Not CD baby.
Not a baby covered with seeds.
Or some kind of very hungover child.
Or a seed in the shape of a baby.
No. I love how you went seeds and I went like seedy baby.
I immediately went,
a flasher baby in the back
baby
alley.
There, I just want to steer away from
from
sex crimes.
Yeah, of course.
Hey, I was just thinking hungover. Like I'm feeling
You
a bit
literally
seedy
went flasher
today.
baby.
Yeah, like that's the second place I went to. That's the second place I went to. The first was very hungover child.
We're all on the list now, so.
And so this is a podcast with about over 200 episodes talking about how to be a musician, how to make it in the industry, how to make a release schedule, do a music video, figure out everything around being a musician. So yeah, I'm interested to know what you thought.
Nick.
It's interesting because when this one came along, I don't want to be that person, but like I love music. I adore music.
We know this about you.
I make it as a hobby. I don't release any of it. I just make it as a hobby.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things you just do at home. You don't
Yeah.
share it with anyone because if you do, it's fucking embarrassing. That's me.
I mean, that used to be my cross stitch, but now I start cross stitching
Oh yeah, but
swear words and everyone loves
that's
it.
because that's fucking amazing,
Yeah,
right?
but when
no
it
one
was
wants to listen
hearts
to
and
my
flowers,
weird fucking
no one-
ambient shit.
I kind of do.
Like, no, you
Is
don't.
it like Ross in Friends?
Oh, actually. Ooh, look, I really, really enjoyed this. I think for me, Zane, it's interesting because this one came along at a really good time because I was kind of struggling with just getting the motivation to just open up Ableton and just muck around and just enjoy the experience of doing it. And one of the episodes I listened to was Productivity Hacks for Musicians, which was a really fascinating episode because they talk about those tasks where for me, because it's a hobby, I don't really have much of an end goal for what I want to make or for what I want to work on. So for me, I found myself going to different projects and picking and all that sort of stuff. And one of the key points that came out of this for me was focus on the one thing, and that's it. That's your day of focusing on one track or on one sound or on one, and then that's your goal for the day. And when I kind of reframed it, I found it really quite helpful because I was like,
We don't have that paralyzing fear of here's all of the things that I want to do. Which do I do?
And also I think all of us can relate to this as creatives, right? Like, I mean, I hate everything I do. I don't like sharing it because I hate everything I do. So I don't want to. So I just move it on. I'm like, that sounds shit. I'm moving it on. Or this.
9 times out of 10, correct.
Exactly. Right. And so for me, like this podcast itself is a really, really great resource. And I think it lends itself to that because the hosts, who I'm blanking their names, Kevin and Chris, are really, really welcoming. Like their delivery and how they talk and how they
It's really
deconstruct
accessible.
this stuff. Yeah, like the accessibility of it is quite remarkable. But I mean, like it's quite self-explanatory, really. Like if you're really looking or you're really struggling with any form, and look, I don't even think it's just for music, really, because some like with those productivity hacks, you can apply that to anything you do creatively.
That's what my comments are on this podcast. Is
Yeah.
that I listen to how to increase organic Spotify traffic because, like, as a podcaster, I want to do that too.
Yeah.
So you can apply a lot of these theories to any creative endeavor that you want to advance in any way, shape, or form. I also, though, was like, I don't have time to do any of this stuff. But that's a me problem, not a podcast problem. But yeah, like it's super applicable to any, and even not even just creative stuff, but any stuff sometimes that you just want to do more of. Like productivity hacks are going to work regardless of what you're working on, you know?
Yeah, and I think it's even if you've heard them all before, I feel like with some of this stuff, and especially with this, there are sort of those things where people reframe a particular tip that make you go, oh, I didn't really think of it like that. I'll approach it that way, and that can kind of help with you.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like
with
you're
doing
being
whatever you're
lectured.
doing.
In
Not
this.
at all.
Like
Not at all.
It feels like rather than being like, you should do it like this, they're like, have you thought about this? And I'm like, well, no, I didn't, but thanks for that.
Yeah,
Awesome.
exactly. And that was another key thing, is that I'm not being lectured to. It's just basically like, hey, we all go through the same fucking shit. So here's some advice.
Yeah.
And obviously it does gear itself quite significantly to music, CD Baby, blah blah blah. But for me,
But that's the thing.
this
There
is
is a
all
lot
applicable elsewhere.
There's a lot of overlap with musicians and literally any other kind of creative.
Yeah.
Because I'm just scrolling through now and it's just like how to get back out there in 2021. Like that's not even
That's my dating
thing.
life. How do I do that?
Tell me
like
more,
get on
CD baby.
stage, and I'm like, no, not that much.
Yeah, it's just like or like why are you wasting your time creatively, and like what are you doing
Why
that's
am
wasting
I?
time?
Everything in my life.
Why?
Yeah, so I'm glad that you really enjoyed it because this is
I'm not a musician, so I honestly did think that I would be like, whatevs. But
Yeah.
it's super applicable to many other creative
Yeah,
formats.
and
Can't think of a
even
word.
like I don't consider myself a musician at all, but I was just like, oh yeah, this is going to be like. To be honest, I actually thought it would be a load of wank, but I was like, it applies to how I'm feeling about my creative stuff at the moment. Give it a go, and it's worked out perfectly. So
Yeah.
and like this is super well produced and super approachable. So good. I'm glad.
Cool. Let us pivot to mine, which was How to Fail with Elizabeth Day. So she interviews different people and tries to explore self-improvement through her interviewees' worst moments. What did we think?
I really enjoyed this. Like I promised, I listened to Stanley Tucci. And I realized that while Stanley Tucci is a really nice person and a very interesting person and a good person to talk to, it doesn't make a good podcast guest.
Oh, no.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And it was really interesting just to realize that. And like, I think he has a very on face for where, like, when he's on TV and like he switches on, and I just don't think he ever got to that place in the podcast. So it was kind of like, what you're saying is very interesting to me, but you're not saying it in an engaging way.
Ah.
Which was really interesting because like I didn't think any less of him for it. In fact, like I started thinking up excuses for why it's like this.
I mean, sometimes we all have off days, I guess.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
And you can tell sometimes when I'm not here on this
and
podcast.
he's talking about his fight with cancer and like how it affected
That's
his
rough.
life.
Maybe he's dissociate. See, I'm doing it too. I'm making excuses for him.
But like, yeah, also sharing stories about like how he connected with his wife and things like that. It was a really great way to approach this question of how do you talk to someone about who is successful about all the times that they thought that they haven't been successful.
Because that is something, and we were literally just saying it, talking about DIY Musician, is that as humans, we are programmed to think that what we do is shit.
Yeah.
And it sucks. And how do we learn from those feelings?
Well, we're programmed to fear shame and
Yes.
shunning from everyone else. And when we don't get positive reinforcement from other people, we automatically assume shunning because that protects us from asking.
Yeah.
And I think this is a really great way to approach that, because Stanley Tucci says at the beginning of his episode, is like, I don't consider myself successful. It's like,
And everybody else in the world is like,
Like,
what?
yeah.
obviously
Yes.
I've had a lot of success and
Yeah.
I have success, but I don't really think of myself as being a successful person.
Gosh, it's just really nice to know that even the people who you see as super successful have the
Yeah.
same fears and doubts that you do.
But yeah, super charming to listen to. Elizabeth Day has a great manner of just kind of asking the next question to kind of keep the flow going, without ever feeling like prying.
It's
not
never
really
a hard
delving.
pivot from her,
Yeah.
and it's just kind of like it's like there's a ball that's rolling down, and she just gives it a little
Yeah.
push to roll a little bit further.
Yeah.
And it stumbles up against a rock and she just nudges it around.
Nudges it around, yeah.
So yeah, it's really smooth listening. You never feel like, okay, we were back into interview mode. It's just a friendly conversation.
Yeah, and I think that that's what appealed to me. So I listened to the Darren Brown episode, which was terrific because I love Darren Brown. Look, it's hard because I'm just going to basically parrot everything that Zane said. For me, the show does a very good job of masking whatever the person that is being a guest on is like there for. So obviously, for the most part, the guests are there for a reason. So obviously they're to tell their story, but they're there to market like whatever they're, book, movie, whatever. But you never really get that vibe, and it never really feels shoehorned in at that stage. And I think it is really a credit to Elizabeth Day, who does a really, really good job of just managing the show. And it does feel quite gentle to me. This was one of those shows that what was I doing? I decided I've got to get up. My place is a fucking wreck, and I'm going to just put my earphones in and go. And that was what I did. And this lends itself perfectly to that, because the conversation and the subject matter, like with Darren Brown's one, it's interesting because to me, he comes across so strongly on the screen and on stage, but hearing how he gets there and how he was bullied and made fun of because of his sexuality, and to get to where he is now, where that sort of performing was his escape and his confidence, where he found his confidence being on stage in front of everyone, even though he was bullied by everyone, was a really fascinating sort of evolution for someone that all I know of him is that he's really good at manipulating people on television, which is fucking awesome. But this is a really, really good show. I think it's a really good example, again, a really good example of a celebrity show. Do you know what I mean? Like a celebrity is interviewed on a podcast.
Yeah, and it doesn't ever feel like a celebrity show.
No, not at all. Not at
It
all.
also doesn't feel like a self-help show.
No.
It's stealth
It's like-
self-help.
Yeah.
Stealth. That's
Stealth-
really how to
it's
say
stealth help.
It's stealth help.
Yeah.
Like the lessons are there if you want to learn them, but
Yeah.
it's not saying like Stanley, this happened to this person
So
and
do it
they
this
learned
way.
this lesson, so
Yeah.
you can learn that lesson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Let us then pivot to the other How To emotional podcast that Nick recommended.
So my recommendation a fortnight ago was How to Build a Happier Life from The Atlantic with Arthur C. Brooks, who is a Harvard professor of some sort, not manipulating, but like really good at analyzing human behaviors, but also what drives particular feelings, behaviors within this sort of thing. The thing that I said was that appealed to me about it was that it's not just about what you do when you're sad or what you do when you feel lonely. It's about what you do when those things happen, but also why you do them and why they help you and what you can do to sort of like extend and not extend your happiness, but at least continue being happy or becoming happier, I guess. What do you think?
Before we talk about this podcast, I just want to talk about Harvard for a second.
Okay.
So
Harvard's like good, right?
Obviously it's an Ivy League school, and everyone is like, I went to Harvard, I'm a Harvard graduate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In doing research on Harvard for this, because I just went on a bio click hole. I found out that 45% of Harvard students are grandfathered in either from alumni or thing. And I was like, that's half people who their grades just don't matter.
Yeah, they're legacies.
They're just in there.
Absolutely.
I was like, how can they have such a great reputation when for being so grade
because
specific?
rich people,
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
legacy people in, and rich people own the people that say how great shit is.
I guess that's true. They just have a really good alumni association.
Yep.
Not to say this guy is a great expert and great interviewer as well. I listened to How to Know When You Don't What You Don't Know, or it was something like that, like how
to know that you know nothing.
How to know that you know nothing, which is a very interesting conversation, and it's literally just about how people think, and get through life and talk to themselves about how they think about how they think. Very interesting, and it's not Zane Dry, but it's not particularly. I went to say Liz Moist, and I stopped myself, but I thought I should throw that out there. It's not exactly the wettest piece of media that I've ever experienced.
Please don't make Liz Moist a thing.
Or the wettest piece of media.
Or it might have just been the episodes that I listened to, but they did have moments of where they were a little drier than a conversation, like a chatty conversation. Yeah.
This is tough to listen to, not because it's bad, but because I am not doing the work that I should be doing in my life right now.
And it's telling me that.
I listened to... It's very good, and I will wholeheartedly recommend this to myself when I'm in the mood to do the work. I listened to How Not to Be Your Own Worst Enemy.
Oh, no. That's too much work for today.
Bashed me up. That thing left me bruised and broken. And then because I'm a glutton for punishment, I let it roll to the next episode, which is How to Know You're Lonely. And as someone who's been single for 4 years, and I was previously happy about it. The reason why this is tough is because it is good and it is correct. It gave really good, at the end of the How to Not Be Your Own Worst Enemy episode, they actually okay, so they talked all about where it comes from and everything. They're like, okay, so what are you going to do about this? Here's a list. Here is a list of things that you need to do. Write this down, write that down, write that down, and then at the end of the day, see how you feel about this. There are absolutely practical steps that one who is in the mood can take.
As Liz braces the table.
I know, I'm bracing it because I was like, oh my God. I knew that I wasn't in the mood for it because they're like, how not to be your own worst enemy. They're like, write down the things that you think that you are that mean that you're not good enough. And what does that, why does that matter to you? And I'm like, because it fucking does, okay?
You don't know
and they're
me.
like, and then assess at the end of the day whether that's really worth it or not. And I'm like, it may not be worth it, but it's fucking important. It's
Shut
like,
up,
you don't know me, you're not
podcast.
my mom. Meanwhile, my mum tells me this, and I'm like, "You're not my therapist."
And then my therapist is like, you're not the podcast that I listen to.
Sarah said, what the fuck?
I just keep shifting blame to literally everybody. No, this is a good podcast, and I did my top podcast to help calm your farm. Whilst I don't find this calming in the self-soothing way, I find this calming in the genuine self-help way. So I would have added this to my list. Had I not already given my review, well, had I, you know what I mean, had
Yeah.
the episodes been in the right order, that you would have heard my review before I review it positively. I've spoiled the surprise, you guys. You don't want that.
100%.
Okay.
We don't do spoilers here.
No spoilers.
Remember that one time we did spoilers?
Yeah, we did that spoiler break.
Didn't we do? We did like fast forward like 20 seconds and we're just
Yeah.
going
Yeah,
to
what was it for?
rip it.
I think it was Game of Thrones.
Was it Game of Thrones?
Was it Game of Thrones? I feel like we were just spoiling a podcast, like, and
Oh, that's
like
true,
talking about the
maybe.
ending of a podcast.
think
'Cause
that might
that's
have
what
been
we
it.
do here, not talk about TV shows.
Well, we do talk about Game of Thrones a lot for someone who doesn't talk about TV shows
It's
at all.
just because we're mad. I'm still not over it.
Fucking angry.
I needed therapy because of the end of Game of Thrones. And if they mess up House of the Dragon too, I am going to flip tables, literally and figuratively.
I mean, I don't think I'm going to watch it.
Okay, we'll tell you all about it then.
That's fair.
All right, that's us done for this week. Come back next week if you would like a curated list from which one of you is doing next week's mini?
It is I.
It is Nick. So if you want Nick's curated list of stuff that you should be listening to, come back next week. And if you don't, skip next week. And
And a week after that, come back for the much anticipated niche off that we're having.
oh,
For
yes.
3 niche podcasts.
3 niche podcasts. It's the niche off time. We're basically competing to see who wins the niche off. And we want your opinion as well. Like, write in and tell us next week. But that's next week's problem. Next fortnight's problem.
Yep.
Until then, if you would like us to recommend your podcast, go to that'snotcanon.com/castology and fill out our handy dandy little form, or even just a podcast that you love. Or you can review us, give us a 5-star rating, and chuck a podcast that you love in the comments section. Because hell, we read that too. We're not ashamed about reading all of our reviews over and over and over and over and over.
I'm picking up on a little bit of shame.
Yeah, so am I.
I'm not ashamed. I literally have a segment on my other podcast where I read out reviews. And I had a tote bag that has one of my 1-star reviews on it because I own that shit and I love it. I do. Yeah, so for Ghosts of Boyfriends Fast, sorry, side note, someone wrote a review that said, it's funny enough, but there's a lot of anger and judgment directed at men.
That's right.
And I was like, that's the point.
Yep.
So one of our lovely guests, one of our fans came in as a guest and had it printed on a tote bag for me, and I love it with all my heart.
So I'm just going to say the bar's pretty high for any Castologist fans out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To send us some gifts.
Yeah, send us gifts. That bag was full of chocolate, just saying. But otherwise, just send us reviews. We're happy with 5-star reviews. We love that because then it helps other people find your podcast if you recommend your podcast to be on our show.
Yeah.
Well, help us help you.
All your
Help
friends'
us
podcasts too.
help you. In the meantime, I have been Liz Best here with
Nick Bleeker.
and
Zane C. Weber.
keep listening to podcasts.